Imagine going from mowing lawns as a broke student to buying the very bank that finances half a country's dreams. That's the kind of wealth we're talking about in this video, as we take a peek into 8 of the wealthiest and most fascinating families across the Caribbean. 8. The Hendrickson family, from sliced bread to hotel hegemony. If you've ever been in Jamaica, chances are you've eaten something with the Hendrickson stamp on it, even if you didn't realize. Their story began humbly with National Baking Company, which in the 1950s pioneered something Jamaicans take for granted today: pre-sliced, wrapped bread. What sounds ordinary now was revolutionary at the time, and it turned a small bakery into the nation's go-to supplier of hard-dough bread and those iconic water crackers. But bakeries were just the beginning for the Hendricksons. Kevin Hendrickson, one of the family's most prominent figures, made a leap that seemed random at first, but ultimately paid off. Using profits from bread, he quietly bought up some of Kingston's most valuable hotels, like the Pegasus and Courtleigh, transforming them into staples for business travelers and diplomats. Meanwhile, his brother Butch kept the ovens going, meaning this was a family empire firing on parallel tracks: food and hotels. What makes the Hendricksons fascinating isn't just their reach, but how woven into daily Jamaican life they've become. From school lunches to corporate boardrooms, from the snack you grab on a quick break to the hotel where you host your wedding, odds are a Hendrickson business is involved. And yet, there's always the looming question: can bread and beds hold off foreign competitors and flashy new hotel brands moving into the Caribbean market? It's an old-school empire in a fast-changing world. And now, we're stepping from flower power to liquid gold, Jamaica's beverage gatekeepers, with one of the craziest wealth stories. 7. The Lee Chin family, landscaper to billion-dollar banker. The story of Lee Chin family is almost cinematic. Michael Lee Chin, born in Jamaica to modest beginnings, took his first jobs mowing lawns and sweeping floors at a hotel. Nothing glamorous, just the grind with an ambition. Fast forward a couple decades, and he's the man who would end up controlling National Commercial Bank, Jamaica's banking backbone. That's the kind of leap you usually only hear about in movies, except his story is entirely real. Lee Chin's wealth foundation came through his company, AIC, in Canada, which managed billions at its peak. His strategy was deceptively simple: invest in a handful of businesses that generated steady cash flow, hold on to them, and let compounding do the heavy lifting. It was an approach that turned him into a billionaire. But instead of leaving his success behind in Canada, Lee Chin brought it back home. Through Portland Holdings, he took a controlling stake in NCB Jamaica, which is basically the financial bloodstream of the island. Every loan, every mortgage, and every major transaction, chances are it passes through his bank. But you know, a meteoric rise like this doesn't come without its share of controversy. As a high-profile billionaire, Lee Chin has faced media scrutiny over the years, including widespread debates about corporate governance and investment decisions in some of his companies. However, these have largely been standard corporate disputes rather than personal scandals. Anyway, here's the big question that still lingers. Can old-school buy-and-hold investing keep pace with fintech disruptors and the volatility of global markets? That's a test the next generation will have to face. But if that pivot felt bold, wait till you meet the family that quietly laid out entire Jamaican suburbs and sat in the rooms where national policies are written. 6. The Matalon family, the builders who drew a city on the map. Not every rich family in Jamaica built their fortune selling products. Some of them literally built the country itself, and the Matalons are the prime example. Descendants of Syrian Jewish merchants, they turned their roots in trade into something much larger: construction and finance. And their signature masterpiece? Well, it's the Greater Portmore Housing Scheme, the largest housing project in the English-speaking Caribbean. Think about that scale for a second. They didn't just build homes, they practically drew a city onto the map, and they didn't stop there. Through their ICD Group holdings, the Matalons expanded into finance, logistics, and even media, ensuring they weren't just pouring concrete, but also steering how money and information flowed across the island. Key members of the family have chaired major national institutions like the Development Bank of Jamaica, while others took leadership roles in the private sector organization of Jamaica. Translation: they weren't just building neighborhoods, they were helping shape economic policy. Their influence goes deep: mortgages, infrastructure, private sector lobbying, you name it. If you've driven through Kingston or Portmore, you've seen their legacy in bricks. But if you've ever felt the effects of Jamaican monetary policy, you've probably felt their influence too. The challenge ahead? Rising costs of construction, new climate resilience standards, and the urgent need for sustainable housing. From pouring concrete to pouring drinks. Next up, we meet a family that turned bottling lines and distribution trucks into a large consumer empire. 5. The Mahfood family, the beverage and distribution gatekeepers. Picture this: you walk into a shop in Jamaica, grab a bottle of soda or a pack of snacks, and head to the counter. Whether it's local water, a bigger soft drink, or even Coca-Cola, there's a solid chance the Mahfood family made sure it got to that shelf. This Lebanese-Jamaican family controls Wizinco, which is basically the central nervous system of the island's consumer goods market. Their empire has two engines: beloved local brands like Water and Bigger, and the exclusive rights to distribute over 100 international products, including Coke. In business terms, that means they don't just own the brands, they own the pipes that deliver them. This dual setup has given them staggering market power. When you can both create your own products and control what goes into supermarkets, restaurants, and corner shops, you effectively become the invisible hand-guiding consumer choices. And because beverages and snacks are everyday items, the Mahfood's influence stretches into nearly every Jamaican household. But dominance comes with its challenges. Global conversations about sugar taxes, rising health consciousness, and the environmental toll of plastic bottles all hover over the soft drink industry. Add rising input costs, and you get a family that has to constantly innovate to keep their dominance unchallenged. Yet, despite those hurdles, the Mahfoods remain one of the strongest distribution forces in the Caribbean. They've mastered a model that ensures whether it's water, soda, or even imported juices, the final stop before reaching your hands often runs through their warehouses and trucks. We've done bread, banks, buildings, and beverages. Now it's time for the families who move entire economies, starting with a Trinidadian conglomerate that seems to own half the map. 4. The Kerr-Jarrett family, Montego Bay's landed power. If you've ever driven through Montego Bay and wondered who actually owns half the coastline, the answer is often the Kerr-Jarrett family. Their empire wasn't built on skyscrapers or factories, but on something far more fundamental: land. Generations ago, the family held vast sugar estates. Instead of selling them off when sugar waned, they played the long game, holding on to dirt until tourism and urban growth made it liquid gold. Today, their portfolio reads like a map key for Western Jamaica. Resorts, housing projects, commercial centers. If the address is hot, chances are the Kerr-Jarretts have fingerprints on it. And they don't just sit on land. They're masters of repurposing, turning sugar plots into hotel corridors, residential suburbs, and logistics hubs. When Montego Bay expands, they capture value each time zoning laws shift or a new hotel flag plants its sign. Their influence isn't just in property deeds. The Kerr-Jarretts have actively pushed policy ideas to position Montego Bay as more than a beach town. Logistics, tech, diversified investment. They want Mo Bay to become a regional hub, not just a playground for sunburnt tourists. But holding prime land comes with baggage. Coastal resilience is a real issue, and over-tourism can choke the very beauty that makes Montego Bay attractive. The question is whether the family can future-proof their empire against rising seas and shifting tourist tastes. And while the land is power, the industrial scale is louder, which brings us to the conglomerate whose beer, media, and insurance touch millions every day. 3. Orlando Bravo, the software buyout king. Most people know Puerto Rico for its beaches, but in finance circles, it's known for producing one of private equity's sharpest tacticians, Orlando Bravo. He grew up on the island, went to Wall Street, and ended up building Thoma Bravo, now one of the world's top software buyout firms. Here's his genius move. Instead of chasing trendy startups, Bravo targeted established software companies. Buy them, streamline operations, boost profitability, and repeat. It sounds almost boring on paper, but it has generated tens of billions in returns and turned him into Puerto Rico's richest native son. His fingerprints are on cybersecurity firms, fintech rails, and countless enterprise software products you've probably never heard of but almost certainly use indirectly. What makes him stand out is how he tied his global success back to the island. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico, Bravo didn't just cut a donation check, he committed over $100 million to create long-term entrepreneurial pipelines, ensuring future Puerto Rican founders wouldn't have to leave the island to make it big. He's an equal part financier, philanthropist, and proof that you don't need to run a brewery or inherit land to dominate Caribbean wealth rankings. But like every empire, his has challenges. Rising interest rates and seismic shifts in artificial intelligence could either squeeze his portfolio or hand him the next round of bargains. Global tech is massive, sure, but can it compete with a Caribbean conglomerate that brews the beer, writes the headlines, and insures the risks? You're about to find out. 2. The Sabga family, the conglomerate next door. If there's one name that echoes in every corner shop, newsroom, and insurance office in Trinidad and Tobago, it's Sabga. Their company, Ansa McAl, is the Caribbean's all-purpose conglomerate. Beer, media, auto sales, insurance, finance, real estate, you name it, they've planted a flag in it. The story begins with Anthony Sabga, a Syrian immigrant who arrived in Trinidad as a teenager with almost nothing. What started as a small Port of Spain shop has grown, over 3 generations, into a sprawling empire. Carib Brewery churns out Carib and Stag, national staples. Guardian Media runs newspapers and radio stations that shape public opinion, and their insurance and finance arms ensure they're not just selling you a drink, but also insuring your car and possibly financing your mortgage. The Sabga's true genius is in the loop they've built. They make the products, distribute them, advertise them on their own media, and then finance the purchases. It's an influence circle that touches daily life in Trinidad in ways that far exceed their estimated wealth of hundreds of millions. But the challenges are mounting. Media is fragmenting, younger drinkers are more open to imported premium beers, and rising borrowing costs test the conglomerate model. The Sabgas aren't invincible, but their grip on the Caribbean economy is hard to overstate. But even with all their grip on the Caribbean economy, the Sabgas don't match the banking dynasty that moves billions in the shadows. Here comes the #1 family on our list with one of the most fascinating stories you will ever listen to. 1. The Safra family, the crown jewel of Caribbean wealth. Here's the thing about this family. When other billionaires need somewhere discreet to move or protect their fortunes, they call the Safras. That's how deeply embedded this family is in global finance. Their story starts centuries ago in Aleppo, where their ancestors were gold traders. Over generations, the family expanded banking operations across Beirut, Brazil, the US, and Switzerland. Under Joseph and Edmund Safra, they became synonymous with private banking discretion and bulletproof balance sheets. By the time Joseph Safra died in 2020, he was the richest banker in the world. The Caribbean connection? Offshore hubs in the Bahamas and Cayman Islands form part of their vast network, allowing capital to flow across borders quietly but efficiently. These aren't flashy resorts or bottling plants. These are the silent arteries of global capital. And unlike most families on this list, the Safras aren't just regional players, they're a global dynasty with wealth estimated at $16 to $23 billion. Their assets span Banco Safra in Brazil, J. Safra Saracen in Switzerland, and Safra National Bank in New York. But it's their reputation that matters most. Conservative, discreet, multi-generational, they've built a platform that other dynasties depend on. Their influence is so quiet, yet so dominant, it feels like the final boss of Caribbean wealth. In short, the Safras are the crown jewel of Caribbean wealth, the family other dynasties call when the stakes hit generational. And this concludes our journey through the 8 richest families in the Caribbean. If you enjoyed this exclusive tour through the richest Caribbean families in the world, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more rich content.